pregnant widow was cast into a blizzard, until a stranger saved her and the baby underscore 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 underscore. The wind cut through Martha Kellaway's threadbare shawl like a blade, each gust carrying the scent of snow and judgment. She pressed her back against the cabin door, watching her brother-in-law Thomas load her belongings into his wagon with the efficiency of a man burying shame. "You brought this on yourself," he said, not meeting her eyes. His breath clouded in the bitter air. "Samuel's been dead 4 months. That child you're carrying, it ain't his." Martha's hand moved to her swollen belly, protective and fierce. "You know that's a lie." Thomas hefted her trunk into the wagon bed with unnecessary force. "Town council don't see it that way." "Neither do I." He straightened, finally looking at her. A decent woman would have waited. Would have mourned proper. The accusation hung between them like smoke from a dying fire. Martha had loved Samuel Kellaway with everything she had, nursed him through the consumption that ate him alive, held his hand as he begged her to remember him in joy, not sorrow. She'd honored that promise for exactly one night, their wedding night, 3 days before he died. "Samuel was my husband," she whispered. "For 3 days." Thomas spat into the snow. 3 days don't make you family. Don't make that bastard legitimate. The word hit her like a physical blow. She doubled over as another contraction seized her, sharp and demanding. The baby was coming whether the world was ready or not. Thomas watched her pain with cold satisfaction. "Should have thought about that before you spread your legs for whoever came calling. There was no one else." The words came out fierce, desperate. "Samuel made me promise to live, to love again if I could. But there's been no one else, Thomas. This child is his. Prove it." He climbed onto the wagon seat, gathering the reins. "Prove it to the coyotes and the cold. Town's got no place for whores and their bastards." The wind picked up, howling through the pines like the voices of the damned. Snow began to fall in earnest now, fat flakes that stuck to Martha's hair and shoulders. She could feel the storm building, feel winter's teeth preparing to bite. "You can't leave me here," she said, but her voice was lost in the wind. Thomas looked back once as he drove away, his face a mask of righteous anger. But for just a moment, Martha caught something else in his eyes, doubt, maybe even regret. Then the snow swallowed him whole. And she was alone with the storm and the life growing urgent inside her. The storm came down like God's own fury, turning the world white and wild. Martha had managed to drag herself inside before the worst of it hit. But the cabin offered little comfort. The fire had died to embers. And another contraction tore through her with savage intensity. Through the frosted window, she could see nothing but swirling snow. The wind shrieked around the cabin's corners, rattling the shutters like skeletal fingers. Then, through the white curtain of the blizzard, a shadow moved. A figure on horseback, dark against the pale fury of the storm. Man-shaped. But moving with the slow deliberation of someone who belonged to this wild place. The horse stopped at the edge of the clearing. And the rider sat motionless, studying the cabin. Another contraction seized her, stronger this time. She doubled over with a cry that was swallowed by the wind. When she looked up again, the stranger had dismounted, moving through the snow with surprising grace, his long coat billowing behind him like dark wings. He reached the porch just as Martha collapsed against the door. Through the thin wood, she heard his boots on the steps. One knock, firm but not demanding. "Ma'am." His voice carried a roughness that spoke of years and hard weather. "You need help." The door swung open, bringing a gust of snow and cold air. The stranger filled the doorway, tall and weathered, his face shadowed beneath his hat. Ice clung to his dark beard. And his eyes, when they found hers, held depths she couldn't fathom. Jesus, he breathed, taking in her condition. Without hesitation, he stepped inside, closing the door against the storm. Martha had expected questions, demands to know who she was or what she was doing here. Instead, he simply shrugged out of his coat and moved to the fireplace. Within minutes, he had the fire blazing again, filling the cabin with warmth and dancing light. "What's your name?" he asked, not looking at her as he fed wood to the flames. "Martha." "Martha Kellaway." He nodded once. As if the name meant something to him. "I'm Ezra Cole. And unless I'm mistaken, we need to get you ready for what's coming." Outside, the wind howled its fury. But inside the cabin, warmth began to win its ancient battle against the cold. The baby came with the dawn, small and perfect and screaming his defiance at the world. Martha held him close, tears streaming down her face as she counted his tiny fingers, traced the curve of his ear. He had Samuel's nose, she was certain of it, that stubborn tilt that had made her husband look perpetually ready for an argument. "Samuel," she whispered into the baby's soft hair. "Your name is Samuel." Ezra sat by the fire, cleaning his hands with snow-melt water. He'd worked through the night with the patience of a man who understood that some battles couldn't be rushed. When the worst had come, when Martha's strength had nearly failed and the baby had seemed reluctant to enter this harsh world, he'd stayed calm, his voice steady and sure. "He's got good lungs," Ezra said, not turning from the fire. "That's what matters out here." Martha looked around the cabin in the growing light. It was larger than it had seemed in the storm, rough-hewn but solid, built by hands that knew their craft. Books lined one wall, their spines worn with reading. A fiddle hung beside the door. On the mantel, a daguerreotype showed a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Your wife?" Martha asked. Ezra's hand stilled. "Was. Sarah died 3 winters back. Fever took her fast." He fed another log to the fire, the flames casting shadows across his weathered face. This was her place. She always said it felt like home should feel, safe, hidden, blessed. "Why did you help me?" Martha asked. "You don't know me. Don't know if what they say about me is true." Ezra finally turned to look at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "Sarah and I, we tried for years to have children. Never took." He paused, watching the baby sleep. She used to say that children were God's way of proving he still believed in tomorrow. Figured if that's true, then helping one get born safe might count for something. Martha felt tears threaten again. "The town, they said I was a whore. Said this baby was illegitimate. Towns say a lot of things. Don't make them true." Ezra stood, moving to the window to peer out at the snow-covered pines. "Besides, I knew Samuel Kellaway. Good man. If he claimed this child, that's enough for me." 3 months passed like a dream wrapped in pine smoke and baby's breath. Martha had grown strong again, her body healing from the ordeal of birth and betrayal. Little Samuel thrived in the mountain air, his eyes bright with the curiosity that comes to children raised on wonder instead of fear. Ezra had become something she'd never expected, a partner in the quiet business of survival. He taught her to read the weather in cloud formations, to preserve meat with salt and smoke, to find peace in the rhythm of daily work. They spoke little of the past, less of the future. The present was enough. But spring has a way of melting more than snow. Martha was hanging wash on the line behind the cabin when she heard it, the distant creak and jangle of wagon wheels climbing the mountain trail. Her hands stilled on the wet cloth, her heart hammering against her ribs. Ezra appeared at her side as if summoned by her fear. He studied the tree lean with the patience of a man who'd learned to read danger in the bend of grass, the flight of birds. "How many?" Martha whispered. 4. Maybe 5. His voice was calm. But his hand rested easy on the colt at his hip. Your brother-in-law's among them. Recognized his bay mare. Through the trees, Martha caught the glint of sunlight on metal. Rifles. They'd come prepared for trouble. Take the baby, Ezra said quietly. Get inside. What about you? He looked at her then. And she saw something in his eyes that made her chest tight with unnamed fear. Some debts can only be paid one way, Martha. Been running from this one too long already. The wagon rolled into the clearing with Thomas Kellaway on the driver's seat, 3 men from town flanked behind him. The 4th rider hung back at the forest edge, Sheriff Preston, his badge catching the morning light like a warning. Thomas climbed down from the wagon, his face hard with righteous anger. Martha. Come out here. Time to face what you done. Ezra stepped onto the porch, his movements deliberate and calm. Lady's got nothing to face, Kellaway. Neither does her boy. Her bastard, you mean. Thomas spat into the dirt. And you, Ezra Cole. Should have known. Town's been wondering what happened to the man who killed 3 deputies down in Silver Creek. Martha's breath caught. She'd never asked about the scars on Ezra's hands, the way he sometimes stared into the fire with haunted eyes. Now she understood the weight he carried. They were crooked, Ezra said simply. Stealing from widows, beating men for sport. Someone needed to stop them. That someone should have been the law, not a drifter with a gun. Sheriff Preston urged his horse forward, his hand resting on his weapon. You're wanted, Cole. Dead or alive makes no difference to me. The baby began to cry from inside the cabin, a thin wail that cut through the morning air like accusation. Martha pressed herself against the door, torn between protecting her child and standing beside the man who'd saved them both. Ezra never moved, never flinched. The woman and child leave here safe. That's all that matters. Thomas laughed, a sound without warmth. She ain't leaving anywhere but hell, Cole. And neither are you. The wind stirred the pines. And somewhere in the forest, a jay called sharp and clear. Spring had come calling. But it brought reckoning in its wake. In the end, mercy and justice walked the same trail, both paid for in blood, both measured in the choices good people made when the world offered them no easy answers.